Morning, folks. Welcome back to Threes and Bobo here. So this morning I want to tell you a little bit about Hangar 9 that sits out on Brooks Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. It's now, I don't know if it's still Brooks City Base or if it's just City Base, or I suspect it's more like San Antonio. But at any rate, I'll tell you that rest of that story here in a minute. I first became acquainted with Brooks Air Force Base in 1967 or early 68. My dad was the commissary officer there, and they had just opened a brand new facility. So I went out there for that opening, and then we went over to the tavern, the officers club, and a nice little club there. And I don't know if I ever met a bad officers club or not, but at any rate. So I went over there, and I kind of became acquainted with it. But the one thing I saw that really caught my attention was this huge white building there. It kind of stood out from everything else. And it was a wooden building. And as it turns out, it is the oldest Air Force wooden hangar in the country. I think in the world, really. But at any rate, Hangar 9. And I had a little museum in there that was just really kind of cool to walk through. You could take your time. They had a Jenny in there, and they had I think it was one of the Apollo space capsules in there, but all kinds of memorabilia. And when I was down there about a year and a half, not quite 2 years ago, I went over there, and that museum was still there at that time. I don't know if it's there or not, but the history behind Brooks Air Force Base and Hangar 9 is kind of interesting. Brooks Air Force Base was named for Sidney Johnson Brooks, who was an aviation cadet going through flight school there. He was 22 years old, and in 1917, in November 1917, he was like doing a solo out and back to Hondo, and then upon arrival back at Brooks, he would have been awarded his wings, but he didn't make it. Earlier that day, he had had a cholera shot, and they think that shot affected him and perhaps incapacitated him on his way back home. He'd flown out to Hondo, landed and got a gas and stretched around and so forth. And they noticed that he was sweating and he was just not feeling too well. But he decided to gut it out, as many of us do when we fly. Hopped back in, took off, and was flying back to Brooks. But on the way back, at 2,000 feet, they noticed the airplane kind of nosed over, and they think he might have passed out. But it nosed over, and he speared in at Kelly Air Force Base and subsequently died. In the late 80s, they decided to dedicate Hangar 9 and a memorial to Sidney Johnson Brooks. So they reached out to the family and got permission to bring his body from downtown out to the base and put him in a memorial there. I remember reading about it. I didn't attend the function, but I remember reading about it in the San Antonio paper. And it was quite a big deal. And I think it was very fitting to bring him out there. And so he was buried there. And then the BRAC system started, the Base Realignment and Closure Committee from Congress. And Brooks came out on the hit list. Now, at that time, in the early 90s, Brooks was the head of the home base for aerospace medicine. Plus, he did a lot of other stuff over there. But AeroMed was there. If we had something wrong with us, we were sent down to Brooks for further evaluation. They also had a centrifuge down there and all kinds of things they could do to you to find out what was wrong with you if you had something wrong with you. They also did things like the physicals for the U-2 guys and the SR-71. They needed astronaut physicals, and they had the expertise there. Okay, fine. So they decided to start closing up Brooks. One of the pressures on the Air Force to do that was San Antonio coveted that real estate down there. San Antonio could not expand anywhere more to the north or east or west, but the south was wide open, more or less. and Brooks kind of sat in the way of it. And about that time, San Antonio was considering or had already signed a contract to bring Toyota in there in the south end of town. So they kind of wanted the infrastructure there. And so they went to the people, fine people at the Air Force and Brooks and said, listen, we'll send out our maintenance guys, plumbers, electricians, and so forth to take care of the facilities at Brooks, and we'll also send out the groundskeepers, seeds and weeds guys, and they can take care of a lot cheaper than you can bringing in active duty Air Force guys. The Air Force said, oh, it sounds like a great deal. And then the people downtown says, and to make the deal a little sweeter, we'll call it Brooks City Base. Right, Brooks City Base. How's that pronounced? San Antonio is how it's pronounced. So they bring in these folks, and they're doing their seeds and weeds duties and fixing electrical problems and all kinds of stuff like that. And then the Air Force began paring down even more. In mid or late 90s, they took the medical function from Brooks up to Wright-Patterson, and then they started shoving out other missions all over the Air Force. Well, eventually it just became city base. There was hardly any Brooks there at all. But Hangar 9 still existed, and Sidney was there all by himself now. He was probably the last Air Force resident there. I don't know if that's true or not. It just sounds about right. Anyway, so I think they've now completely moved all Air Force people off that base, and it's just now pronounced City Base or San Antonio. When I went out there, it was a little tricky to find at first because the field where we used to do our parasail training is now a mall, for crying out loud. And I'm sure it's fine. Okay, good. So, and then there were several other features of the base that I didn't hardly recognize, and the other ones have all been boarded up and closed down. But Hangar 9 was still there the last time I saw, and I haven't seen anything on it that says it's going to close anytime soon. So if you get a chance to visit, by all means, it's worth the trip out there. One last thing I want to tell you about Brooks that I found fascinating. You know, we would do a little bit of work over at Kelly, either instrument work or, on occasion, drop out of the West MOA on our formation rides and fly a formation approach at Kelly Air Force Base, and then come off the end of the field and turn to the east, and we'd fly just over the south end of Kelly or Brooks Field, Brooks Air Force Base. And I used to sit back there or up front and look out the window, and I saw some airplanes. I saw 5 or 6 of them sitting on a closed ramp or a closed runway, and I kept seeing those things. And finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to ask, what are those airplanes down there? And they said, oh, those are F-105s that we shoot bullets into, and then we practice our patch techniques on them. What the hell? You know, why are you shooting up a good F-105? I'll take it. Well, they wouldn't give it to me, so oh well. But it was something fascinating to see down there. And I kind of thought they were F-105s, but until I knew for sure, I didn't want to say anything or whatever. But it turns out they were. So just a couple little nuggets about San Antonio area, Brooks Air Force Base, and the rich history that held. Still holds it, but you got to dig deeper for it. At any rate, hope you enjoyed the story. It's good to see everybody. This is Bobo, Base Gear.